Welcome to the ETICS online tutorials. This is Module 5, Building with ETICS Advanced Level. In the previous Module 4, we saw how to execute or submit builds with ETICS using a small number of very simple commands using the web portal and the Python command-line interface. In many situations, however, it is necessary to customize the build execution or submission to suit specific needs or constraints. In this module, a number of useful options and properties will be explained, and we will show how to set them using the web and the CLI. Let's start with some definitions. A configuration in ETICS can be open or locked. Configurations are created in the open state and can be edited and modified at any time. Open configurations represent development work in progress. Locked configurations cannot be modified and are self-contained in the sense that they contain all information necessary to build them in the same state as they were at the time of locking. All dependencies, versions, properties, build commands, etc. are fixed. Often, open configurations do not contain all information necessary to build them, but inherit such information from their parent project. This allows the setting of default or global properties for an entire project and automatic propagation to all configurations in the project, making them consistent. This is very useful for setting common versions for the external dependencies or common properties. Of course, it is also possible to have standalone configurations, especially for small or very simple projects. In ETICS, the dependencies of a configuration can be defined as runtime, build time, or both. Runtime dependencies are not checked out during the build and are only used when generating binary packages like RPMS and deb files. Build time dependencies are used during the build and when generating the source packages like srpms and source deb files. Of course, a dependency can be both runtime and build time. The three typical steps required to build with ETICS have been described in the previous Module 4. We will now examine a number of useful options for the ETICS checkout and ETICS build commands. Let's take the checkout command shown above and describe each one of the options used. The client sometimes requires confirmation from the user to overwrite existing configurations or when conflicting information is found. The no-ask option instructs the client to assume yes for all such interactive questions without interacting with the user. This is very useful when using the client in automated procedures. Runtime dependencies are not needed during the build, except as information in the final binary packages. Normally the runtime dependencies of runtime dependencies are ignored when generating the build tree. However, they are needed when installing the generated packages and they must be available in the repositories used for deployment, for example YUM or APT repositories. The runtime deps options instructs the client to keep following the dependency tree and generate fully consistent package lists and YUM repositories. For more information about the ETICS YUM repositories, refer to modules 12 and 14 in this tutorial series. When a configuration is locked, all its properties are fixed and the build is executed in the same way as when the configuration was locked. All properties and parameters are local to configurations and cannot be modified. However, it may be necessary to build a locked configuration in a different context to see how it behaves with different values of its dependencies or global properties. The ignore locking options instructs the client to ignore the lock status of the configuration and treat it as if it were open. Open configurations require information from the parent project configurations. The project config option allows you to specify which project configuration should provide the missing information, such as default dependencies values, global properties and parameters, etc. The project configuration does not have to be the current parent configuration. Any configuration of the project can be used to inherit information. This is particularly useful to try the build of a component in different contexts or with completely different sets of dependency versions and property values. When the project config option is used, normally the configuration for checkout is defined by the project configuration itself and it is not necessary to explicitly specify it. In this example, the configuration of org ETICS utils to be checked out is chosen by looking at what configuration is specified by the project configuration ETICS R2501. However, sometimes you want to build a specific configuration of a component inheriting properties from a project configuration that contains a different configuration of your component. In this case, you need to specify explicitly which configuration to take using the -c or config option. If no-ask is not used, the client will interactively warn that the requested configuration does not belong to the project configuration and will wait for confirmation. Let's now take a look at some more options for the ETICS build command. By default, the client executes the full build sequence from init to publish. Sometimes it is necessary to stop at a specific target without completing the full sequence. This is done by specifying the target name with the target option. Possible targets are init, check style, configure, compile, test, doc, packaging and publish. Two additional targets, clean and install, are used outside the build sequence to clean the workspace or install the packages in a specified location. By default, the client builds the entire build tree of the specified component in the correct order. Usually, if a dependency has already been built, it is not rebuilt, but still the client examines the full build tree to check for changes. Sometimes you need to rebuild only a specific component changes in its dependencies. This is done with the No Deps option. If the configuration has already been built, it is not rebuilt unless it has changed on disk. The Force option allows you to rebuild all configurations even if they have not changed, and rebuild the local package repository and stage directory. By default, the client stops execution as soon as an error is found, for example if a package cannot be checked out or information is missing. Usually execution stops at the first error. The Continue on Error option allows you to continue and show all errors in the final report. By default, the client detects the local platform and uses it to select properties and dependencies from the ETICS store. The Platform option allows an override of detection and specifies a different platform from the list of ETICS supported platforms. All the options described so far for the ETICS Python client are available also in the remote build form of the web portal. The options can be selected using the checkboxes and lists provided. In some cases you need to expand the form selections to see all available options. For example, the project config option value can be selected from this list. And the Runtime Deps option can be enabled with this checkbox. There are also fields to specify manual custom properties or any client option for which a specific checkbox is not provided. The equivalent command-line commands are shown at the bottom of the form and can be used also to reproduce the same build using the Python client. This concludes Module 5. In the next Module 6 we will explore the ETICS automated packaging system and a number of properties and options used to customize its behavior.